His British teammate Damon Hill is third on the grid, 1 place behind his arch-rival Michael Schumacher.
For Damon Hill, tension before the one race he can't afford to lose. For Mansell, the last chance to prove that at 41 he's still got the edge over a new generation. His first test came as Johnny Herbert spun his Benetton. 2 cars made it through the gap. Mansell came on the scene a little too quickly. This was the first he saw of the danger, and that was the time it took to react. Once that was sorted out, Mansell attacked this tight street circuit and was back to his best. 18 hundredths was the margin ahead of Schumacher, but it was a crushing blow to the German. Once again, the former world champion was centre stage.
Yeah, I'm just thrilled to be able to have done a time after what happened, and it was a close moment. It really was.
Hill, meanwhile, was left in the wings, the car needing a better setup, the driver still wanting more credit for his recent victories.
All I've done is I've shown you what I knew I could do in the first place.
Schumacher's efforts came to grief on a corner now known as the Senna chicane. He said the impact wasn't very hard. The car can be rebuilt. The damage to his confidence may not be so easy to repair.
Britain's long-range reconnaissance.
Well into our live coverage of the Australian Grand Prix at Adelaide, and maybe we'll have a better idea if the world title is heading to Michael Schumacher, to Damon Hill, or indeed whether Nigel Mansell is going to provide another twist to this extraordinary climax to the season. He's taken pole position after all. The only relevant detail on the Drivers' Championship table is the 1 point by which Schumacher leads Hill. It's head-to-head for the title in Adelaide, from where Murray Walker reports.
As the 1994 World Championship heads for a thrilling climax down under in Australia, we've had just about everything. 35-degree heat, pouring rain, crashes, spins, and a triumphant return to the top by Nigel Mansell. Things haven't gone without incident for Nigel, though, driving the low downforce Williams, which has changed a lot since his 1992 World Championship days. He showed his reflexes are as sharp as ever yesterday when he deliberately spun his Williams to avoid hitting a stationary Johnny Herbert's Benetton. But championship leader Michael Schumacher, under pressure to stop Mansell taking pole position, lost his Benetton in a big way later in the same session and had a massive crash from which he was lucky to escape absolutely unharmed. For Damon Hill, it was vital to be on the same row of the grid as Schumacher, and he's been under even greater pressure. In third place behind the young German, that pressure showed this morning as Damon spun, stalled his engine, and then had to watch his Williams being craned off the track. Time lost and pressure increased. For the final qualifying session today, conditions were bad, with driving rain soaking the track and making it impossible for anyone to improve on yesterday's times. Nigel Mansell, 41 years old, down there in the Williams Renault, and tomorrow he will be starting in his 185th Grand Prix with all that experience and of course the experience of 2 years Indy racing where he was champion last year. And Nigel really wants to get back into Formula One. He's got to make his mark tomorrow because in the French Grand Prix, in the European Grand Prix and in the Japanese Grand Prix he didn't go as well as he would hope to have done, and he was always aiming to do well at in Australia at the last Grand Prix of the year.
Well, knowing Nigel, I would imagine he would be very keen now to display that he's just as quick in the wet as what he is in the dry, and this will be an exercise. He knows that he's got pole position. There's no problems there. This will be, hey, look at this, fellas. I'm now going to show you I can also do it in the wet.
It's amazing watching Michael Schumacher and looking back at him now to realise that yesterday at the Senna chicane doing about 100 miles an hour, he hit the right curb, lost the back of the car, hit the left curb, went into the tyre wall at about just under 100 miles an hour, got out of the car, and he was completely unfazed by what had happened to him yesterday. I talked to him very shortly after he got out of the car. He was totally relaxed. He said that's one of the things that happens in Formula One and you just have to be prepared to put up with it, and it didn't seem to affect him at all.
Look again how hard Damon Hill is trying. He's done a 36.0 on his last lap, and that compares to 33 for Michael Schumacher.
It also demonstrates people like Schumacher, who often get accused sometimes by various people, well, gee, if I was in that car, I could be doing that as well. So when someone with the talent of Schumacher can get out in these conditions and say, all right, you think you could do that as well? I mean, the time today in these conditions, that is driving talent. There, that's it. End of story. But I think all this weekend, Damon has had a tendency to overdrive this car. I mean, he's absolutely trying too hard at the moment.
And we just saw the great demonstration of that very point just then. Damon Hill is under pressure. He knows that, and at the moment, the example is, what we're seeing is the fact that he's not handling that pressure quite as well as Michael Schumacher, despite the fact that Schumacher is some 7 years his junior.
So Nigel Mansell starts the Australian Grand Prix from pole position for the 32nd time in his career, just ahead of Michael Schumacher, who was second fastest. Third on the grid for Damon Hill, behind Schumacher, with Mika Häkkinen's McLaren an excellent fourth. The two Jordan Harts are a superb fifth and sixth, driven by Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine. Johnny Herbert starts seventh in his second Grand Prix for Benetton, with Jean Alesi's Ferrari a, for him, lowly and unhappy eighth. Martin Brundle is ninth for McLaren, and Mark Blundell 13th for Tyrrell. Nigel, you said you weren't going to be on the pace until Japan, and you were. You said you were going to be going for it in Australia, and you're in pole position.
That's fantastic, and I mean the team's done a fabulous job, and you know, the weather conditions today perhaps helped us a little bit, but this morning we were quick until it rained, so I mean I was optimistic to go even quicker if it had been dry.
I'm probably confident because of I don't worry about having Nigel in front of me in pole position by 200ths of a second, but the confidence comes that I'm 6 tenths in front of Damon Hill. That's the more important thing.
I would like to have qualified ahead of Michael and be where Nigel is, but the fact is Nigel is at least ahead of Michael, and that could play a part in the race, and it may prevent Michael from getting some a flow going if Nigel's ahead of him, which would allow me to stay around, and all I have to do is get past Michael. I mean, the best time to do it would be during a pit stop. We don't know how many stops people are going to be making, but you know, tactically it's going to be very, very interesting.
So the prospects are good for a thrilling championship-deciding Australian Grand Prix, which will be shown live on BBC television at 3:15 tomorrow morning. Set the alarm clocks, get up early, it'll be worth it.
Certainly will. This is where you can see it. Last week's Japanese Grand Prix was well worth the early hours viewing. The Australian Grand Prix, well, it may be on the air, well, we're live at 3:15, but motorsport occasions like this come along very rarely indeed. Live at 3:15, repeated at 7:45 in the morning, and Grand Prix highlights tomorrow night, BBC 2 at 9 o'clock.
Now on BBC 2, as the 1994 Formula One season reaches the last crucial round in Australia. Introducing all the action live. Now, here's Steve Ryder.
Takes the checkered flag, but we wait for Michael Schumacher. Aggregate time, I remind you, is what matters. Here is Schumacher, 3.36 seconds. Damon Hill wins the Japanese Grand Prix.
The moment and the margin that has put Damon Hill within just 1 point of emulating the World Championship legacy of his father. Graham Hill, world champion in 62 and 68. On each occasion, he was required to take the title in a last-round decider. And 26 years on from Graham Hill's last-round World Championship triumph in Mexico, Damon faces a similar task in Adelaide tonight. It's the climax of the season. Damon Hill or Michael Schumacher will be champion. And whether it's good evening or good morning, this has the ingredients to be World Championship motor racing at its very best. We've had a season of tragedy and of controversy as well, but the next couple of hours at the Australian Grand Prix promise just sheer excitement. We'll be live on the grid in a few minutes' time. We've known for quite a while that the title lies between Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, but 15 races have gone, just Adelaide remains, and Schumacher has the narrowest one-point advantage. And all we've learned from qualifying this week is that the tension is at its height. This was Michael Schumacher in the first qualifying session. Unhurt, but he still get a place on the front row of the grid alongside the resurgent Nigel Mansell on pole position. Damon Hill with his problems around Adelaide as well, tight but fast street circuit. Damon Hill starts the Australian Grand Prix on row 2.
I slid off like many people, but I didn't do any damage in the wet. But I was much better in qualifying, in the actual qualifying hour in the wet, and the car was much better. But I still hope for a dry race, because I think that 2 hours around here in the wet will be, on top of Suzuka as well, will be more than anyone could bear, to be honest.
I'm probably confident because of I don't worry about having Nigel in front of me in pole position by 0.02 of a second, but the confidence comes that I'm 0.6 in front of Damon Hill. That's the more important thing.
I would like to have qualified ahead of Michael and be where Nigel is, but the fact is Nigel is at least ahead of Michael, and that could play a part in the race, and it may prevent Michael from getting some a flow going if Nigel's ahead of him, which would allow me to stay around, and all I have to do is get past Michael. I mean, the best time to do it would be during a pit stop. We don't know how many stops people are going to be making, but you know, tactically it's going to be very, very interesting.
Now, you have effectively missed 4 races this year, so your points are going to be from 12 races. Do you feel resentful? Do you feel badly treated about that?
I don't want to put it in that direction that I feel treated. No, I think we made a lot of experience this year. We have done mistakes. If the punishment had been the right punishment, you can maybe argue about that, but no, we accepted what happened, and we started from new again after leading the championship quite severe. But now we are here, leading 1 point, and have to make up the championship.
You've shown you can do it, and all of Britain will be hoping you can do it again.
Thank you, Murray, and I will be trying my very best for Britain, I can assure you that.
So Hill against Schumacher for the title, but Nigel Mansell on pole position would dearly love to mark his Grand Prix return with victory today. He's enormously popular in Australia, not least because of Adelaide 86, the desperate moment that cost Mansell the World Championship on the last occasion that the title was decided at Adelaide at the Australian Grand Prix. But it was quite clear from Japan and his breathtaking battle with Jean Alesi that Mansell, the racer, is back on his bravest form. Mansell would finish 4th in Japan last weekend. And it was also clear in qualifying, when Johnny Herbert spun in just about the worst possible position, that Mansell's instinctive car control is back at its sharpest. So Mansell on pole position, but that's only part of the battle.
Now, I hate to point this out, but you're on the front row of the grid.
You will anyway.
But I will. You're on the front row of the grid with Michael Schumacher, who is a demon starter, and your last 2 starts haven't been all that sensational.
They've been wonderful, Murray. You mean I've been going backwards? Well, you know, the thing is, it's got to get a little bit better, but I seriously hope for the championship, and certainly for Damon and Michael, that the weather conditions are better. I don't think we really want the last race to be a lottery, and in these conditions on this type of circuit, I mean, it makes life very difficult.
And the great news for Mansell, Schumacher and Hill and every Grand Prix fan is that this season's decider will be contested in what seems to be ideal conditions, or at least it's dry at the moment. We'll get more from our commentators in position as ever. We'll go live to Jonathan Palmer and Murray Walker.
From Adelaide, welcome to the Australian Grand Prix, with about 9 minutes to go to the start of the race that will decide the 1994 World Championship. And I'm delighted to tell you that after the appalling conditions that we had at Suzuka in Japan last Sunday, the conditions for the race today, as you look at Nigel Mansell in pole position for the 32nd time in his career, are excellent. The circuit is dry, it's a little cloud, it'll keep the heat down, and there's a gigantic crowd here. Even up to today, 210,000 Australians had come to this superb Adelaide circuit, and there's at least 100,000 of them here now. The cars are assembled on the grid. The quarter of an hour period after which they are not allowed to do another formation, another investigation lap, have long since been passed, and the cars are on the grid, headed by Nigel Mansell. Alongside him, just a car's length behind, is the Benetton Ford of World Championship leader Michael Schumacher, and his rival Damon Hill is on the second row of the grid, and that is very significant because the first man into the first corner here is going to have an advantage. Damon Hill, there he is, needs to get close to Michael Schumacher and preferably past him. That's going to be very, very difficult indeed, because Michael Schumacher is famed for his lightning starts, which is more than you can say for Nigel Mansell. Recently, he's had terrible starts. He dropped down to 6th position at Suzuka. He's been practicing his starts here. He's very mindful of the fact that he has a disadvantage, because in the Indy races in which he has been driving for the last 2 years, rolling starts are the rule, and Nigel has got unused to getting away on the lights. So the first few yards of the Australian Grand Prix are going to be absolutely critical. Mansell in pole position, Schumacher second, Hill is third, and fourth is Mika Häkkinen, followed by the two Jordan Harts of Rubens Barrichello, fifth on the grid. Rubens Barrichello fifth on the grid, and his teammate Eddie Irvine sixth. So that's the grid order. There is the crowd. Now, as ever, strategy and tactics are going to be vital. Your view, Jonathan Palmer.
Yes, indeed, and as we look at Damon Hill there, we've been through the last 2 days of a most incredibly highly charged atmosphere here. The pressure on Damon being 1 point behind Schumacher, and the pressure on Schumacher, there is Schumacher, has been absolutely intense. Never has a World Championship been as close for 10 years now, and for these two drivers, the pressure has shown throughout the weekend, it has to be said. We had on Friday a fairly major accident for Michael Schumacher when he was chasing Nigel Mansell's pole position time. He was quite unhurt, but the car was damaged and had to be rebuilt with a new chassis. And we've had a number of spins there for Damon Hill throughout the weekend, so the pressure telling, and it's no great surprise. But strategy is going to be important, and of course that relates to the pit stops for fuel and for tyres. And just to, for those who don't watch Grand Prix too often, this year refueling is allowed, and that means that one does not have to go